In a small town in the heart of Mexico, an extraordinary mission began to emerge. Father Arturo Cornejo, a passionate educator and priest, decided to unite mathematics and faith to transform the lives of young people who felt lost. With the support of Professor Carvalho, he faced unexpected challenges, defied prejudices, and inspired an entire community. Get ready to witness a story of overcoming friendship and the incredible power of education that will touch your heart and transform your perspective on the power of unity and knowledge. Father Arturo Cornejo was born in Mextecocan, a small town located in the heart of Mexico. From an early age, he showed a great interest in numbers and logic. Sons of farmers, his parents always taught him the value of hard work, but also the importance of education. When he was young, Arturo used to solve mathematical problems just to pass the time, without knowing that this passion would lead him to a future very different from what was expected for him. Upon completing high school, his math teacher, Mr. Martinez, noticed his talent and encouraged Arturo to continue his studies. This guidance led the boy to move to the city of Guadalajara, where, despite financial difficulties, he managed to enter university, where he studied mathematics and philosophy. Academic life was challenging, but Arturo was determined, using every opportunity to learn and grow, not just as a student, but as a responsible and caring human being. Mextecocan, his hometown, had always been in his heart, and he dreamed of returning one day to use his knowledge for the benefit of his community. After completing his studies, Father Arturo felt a strong call to the priestly life. Understanding the importance of serving others, he decided that his mission would be to bring the word of God to everyone, especially those who felt forgotten. Once ordained a priest, he returned to Mextecocan, where he quickly became a beloved figure in the community. He not only led masses, but was also involved in various social initiatives, such as building a school. For him, education was a way to free the minds and hearts of young people, showing them that they could have a better future. By leading these activities, Arturo began organizing evangelization meetings in which he not only addressed spiritual issues, but also educational issues, trying to awaken young people's interest in mathematics and science. His vision and determination to educate and evangelize became the foundation of his mission, and his faith in his community inspired many to follow him. The digital mission began to take shape when Father Arturo realized that many of Mextecocan's young people were turning away from religion and school. Attracted by the distractions of technology, he decided that he could not let this generation get lost in the immensity of information that the internet offered. With the help of a group of volunteers, he created an online program of mathematics and catechism classes, using digital platforms to reach young people. The idea was to establish a safe and friendly space, where young people could learn and discuss, feeling comfortable asking questions, even about the simplest doubts. Arturo was surprised when he saw the community's enthusiasm around the initiative. Soon he had a growing list of students eager to participate in his virtual classes, excited not only by the possibility of learning, but also by reconnecting with the faith and morals that Father Arturo so defended. The classes became a local phenomenon, and the priest gained respect and appreciation, not only as a spiritual leader but also as an innovative educator. The impact of online evangelization was beyond expectations. Father Arturo's classes not only revived young people's interest in mathematics, but also promoted a return to fundamental ethical and moral values. He started receiving messages from students who, previously completely uninterested, were now talking about mathematics, statistics, and even how to apply the concepts they learned in their daily lives. The power of education combined with faith was transforming Mextecocan. However, Arturo's fame attracted the attention of the calculus professor at the local university, Mr. Carvalho, who felt intimidated by a priest who was venturing into the field of mathematical education. He then decided to try to expose Arturo during a conference, not knowing that the priest was not only a good educator, but also a true mathematical genius. Father Arturo's humility, always seeking to learn and teach with love, contrasted with Professor Carvalho's arrogance, who ignored the priest's true ability and wisdom. This would create an unexpected confrontation between two worlds, Arturo's humility and wisdom against Carvalho's excessive pride. The first online mathematics class taught by Father Arturo was a real success. With a warm smile, he welcomed his students to the digital platform, creating a light and fun environment. With just a virtual board, He began to introduce the basic concepts of algebra, using everyday examples to facilitate understanding. However, as the class progressed, some distractions began to emerge. Young people, accustomed to the freedom of the internet, could not avoid looking at social networks or games during the broadcast. Father Arturo, realizing this, decided to interrupt for a moment. Instead of getting angry, he took a break to talk to the students about the importance of mindfulness in their studies. With his caring and understanding approach, he managed to capture everyone's attention again, showing that learning could be an enjoyable and productive experience. At the end of the class, Arturo felt accomplished when he saw that many of the students were excited for the next one. He knew that this was just the beginning of a transformative journey for both them and himself. Professor Carvalho, well known for his rigorous methods and authoritarian stance, was aware of Padre Arturo's unexpected success. Angered by the priest's rise in the academic community and the growing popularity of his classes, Carvalho decided it was time to act. On the day of the conference, he prepared a careful presentation with the aim of belittling Arturo's qualities and experience. Sitting in the audience, he concealed a cynical smile as he waited for his turn to intervene. In his view, the figure of the priest had no place in the mathematical education environment, much less in discussions about calculus, which he considered a serious and empirical subject. When the time finally came for Arturo to present his innovative teaching method, Carvalho was determined to interrupt and belittle the priest at the slightest sign of failure. Directly posting dismissive questions seemed to be one of his favorite weapons. He was about to use everything he could to dismantle the reputation Arturo had built, little knowing that the priest had more to offer than he let on. The public's first impressions of the conference were divided. On the one hand, Padre Arturo's students and supporters, who felt inspired and motivated by his welcoming and enthusiastic approach. On the other, a group of more traditional academics, who saw the priest as an intruder in the world of mathematics. During his presentation, Father Arturo spoke about the combination of faith and logical reasoning, demonstrating that mathematics could be a way of understanding divine creation. He used graphs and numbers to express this vision, and the audience began to express curiosity. But Carvalho, impatient, decided that this was not enough. As soon as Father Arturo finished his presentation, Carvalho raised his hand, his gaze showing disdain and superiority. He asked a series of complicated questions, challenging the concepts Arturo had presented and implying that the priest's view was simplistic. The tension in the air was palpable, and the students who until then had been in awe of the power of Arturo's oratory now watched anxiously the priest's reaction. The atmosphere at the conference was intense. Father Arturo could feel Professor Carvalho's disapproval, but instead of letting himself be shaken by the provocations, he took a deep breath and decided to face the challenge. He remembered his childhood, when, even in difficult times, he always sought to learn and grow. With a confident smile, he looked at Carvalho. Mathematics, like faith, teaches us to persevere, even when difficulties seem insurmountable, he replied. He then approached the teacher's questions by understanding each one, using his in-depth knowledge to answer clearly and logically. The students began to realize that, in fact, opportunity was emerging not just for Arturo but for all of them. It was a chance to see a new teaching model in action, one that was not limited to formulas and theorems, but also addressed the human being as a whole. The clash between them turned into a teaching opportunity for Arturo, in a recognition of his academic value, and for Carvalho in a bitter reflection on his own limits and prejudices. Arturo's humility and wisdom began to shine, challenging and inspiring everyone around him. As Arturo progressed through his presentation, his mind wandered to memories of school in Mexico. He remembered when he was a child, sitting in a small, simple classroom, where the sun filtered through the windows, warming the space. His math teacher, Mr. Martinez, was a stern man but also a great inspiration. He always believed in Arturo's potential, providing not just mathematical knowledge, but insight into how mathematics could be the key to new opportunities. On sunny afternoons, Arturo spent hours solving problems, challenging himself to understand the reasons behind each equation. There were moments of concentration and joy, where mathematics stopped being just numbers, becoming a language that expressed the world around them. His love for numbers grew out of his experiences, and now, when facing Carvalho, he felt that those memories helped him connect each point of his journey so far. He was not just a priest, but a passionate mathematician who refused to let others diminish the importance of his mission, both spiritual and educational. As the conference progressed, Arturo began to reflect on the academic challenges he had faced over the years. The transition to university was a turning point. In Guadalajara, competition was intense, and academic standards were high. Priests and mothers of friends often encouraged him to doubt his capabilities, reminding him that he was just a priest seeking recognition in a world dominated by academics. However, adversity became a driving force. Each test, each seminar, and each debate were opportunities for growth. He learned to fight self-criticism and use his faith as a basis for not giving up. Overcoming academic challenges was not just a personal goal, but a way to honor the efforts of his community, which had sacrificed so much for his education. Carvalho's confrontation at the conference became an extension of this fight, and he was determined to show that, with faith and perseverance, everyone could earn the respect they deserved. During the presentation, Father Arturo's love for mathematics showed on his face and in his words. For him, mathematics was not just a subject to be taught, but a passion that pulsed within him. He remembered the nights he pored over math books, exploring theories and solving complex equations. Each number, each equation was linked to a greater purpose, a way of understanding the order of the universe. This love for mathematics was also reflected in his teaching methodology. He believed that if students could see the beauty and applicability of mathematics in everyday life, they would be more motivated to study it. Arturo shared with his students practical examples of how mathematics could be used in everyday decisions, such as calculating percentages in purchases or analyzing sports statistics. His inspiration was contagious, and even the most reluctant students began to see mathematics in a new light. For them, Father Arturo's class was not just a class, but a journey through the fascinating world of numbers. Father Arturo's mentors played crucial roles in his personal and academic formation. He remembered not only Mr. Martinez, but also many others who crossed his path, each leaving an indelible mark on his life. At university, he was lucky enough to meet Professor Elena, a brilliant mathematician who encouraged him to see mathematics as an art. She not only taught complex theories, but also instilled in Arturo the idea that mathematics was a form of expression. In long conversations after classes, she challenged him to question and explore further, always with a curious and questioning look. This was the type of influence that became fundamental for Arturo when teaching his students. He strived to be the kind of mentor Elena was to him, someone who not only imparted knowledge but also inspired confidence and curiosity. The respect that Arturo felt for his mentors was reflected in his way of educating, a dynamic that he hoped to perpetuate among his students, creating a virtuous cycle of learning and inspiration. After the intense conference, Father Arturo sat at his table, surrounded by books and notebooks. The echoes of Professor Carvalho's incisive questions still resonated in his mind. He took a deep breath, trying to process everything that happened. It was a crucial moment of reflection. He knew that the challenge came not only from Carvalho's words, but also from his own desire to be recognized and respected. The priest needed to understand that his mission transcended appearances and academic validation. Education for him was an act of faith and compassion, a way of connecting young people to knowledge and spirituality. Arturo began writing in his journal, "In this clash, this is not a wounded duel between egos, but an opportunity to reflect on how education can shape people's lives. If I don't rise up, I am denying the hope I am trying to sow. This challenge could be a chance to inspire not only my students, but also to show Carvalho that mathematics is inclusive and accessible to everyone regardless of their academic attire." His mind began to calm down as he broke away from the fears and insecurities that haunted him. After reflecting on the situation, Father Arturo decided to act. He knew he needed to prepare for an upcoming meeting with Professor Carvalho, but not just for rebuttal. Their intention was to communicate and build understanding. To do this, he decided to access his network of supporters, students, and even mentors. Arturo called a meeting with his students through the digital platform where he taught. "My dear students, mathematics is a journey you take with us. I would like to hear your voices and ideas about how we can use this moment to our advantage. What do you think you can learn from this?" The energy in the virtual room was palpable. The students were excited to share their opinions, and by the end of the meeting, Arturo had collected several points of view that would not only enrich his understanding of the situation, but also strengthen his argument in the next call with Carvalho. At the end of the day, he was more motivated than ever, aware that wisdom would not only lie in his experience, but in the sum of the collective perceptions and experiences he could bring together. With this new commitment in mind, he realized that his spiritual and educational mission was intertwined with each of those who supported and learned from him. Arturo knew that preparing for the challenge with Professor Carvalho required a meticulous and strategic approach. During the following days, he immersed himself in long studies and discussions. He spent hours reviewing mathematical concepts, not only to understand Carvalho's questions, but to prepare them in a way that made them accessible and engaging for his students. He remembered the fervent discussions they had had with Professor Alina at university, where he had learned to put questions in a practical context. With this in mind, Arturo decided to focus on concrete examples that could answer the most complex questions. He revisited his notes, encouraging himself to further explore the relationship between mathematics and everyday life. The challenge was not just responding to Carvalho's provocations. He wanted to show that education could revolve around the interconnection of knowledge. To do this, he created a small practical project that would invite his students to use it in real life, creating a continuous learning cycle. In Arturo's mind, preparation became an act of love, a way of giving back to the hopes that his community achieved through his classes. By the end of the week, he felt confident, certain that regardless of the response he would get from Carvalho, his true role was to enrich his students' educational experience. Preparing for the meeting with Professor Carvalho, Father Arturo decided that a direct conversation could be more effective than an academic clash. He didn't want the situation to turn into a confrontation full of rivalry. So, with courage and determination, he arranged an informal meeting with Carvalho to discuss not only the differences in their approaches, but also the collaboration and mutual learning that could arise. The days leading up to the conversation were filled with intense expectation, but also hope. On the day of the meeting, Arturo arrived early, revisiting in his mind the reasons why he was doing this. Carvalho arrived punctually, and, before the dialogue became tense, Arturo started the conversation with a friendly tone. "Professor Carvalho, thank you for the opportunity to talk today. I believe that despite our different approaches, we all have the same mission in mind, to inspire the next generation. And I would love to hear your perspective and share mine." With this, Arturo opened a space for dialogue, where both could express their views, creating an environment in which Carvalho, although skeptical, could begin to see the value that Arturo's vision brought to mathematics education, beyond any personal rivalry. This conversation would become the first step towards a new awareness that, in education, true learning often comes from mutual respect and active listening. Tension hung in the air as students prepared for the advanced calculus exam. Father Arturo, with wisdom gained through years of study and practice, knew that many of his students were nervous, but he also felt that they became more confident as time went on. From the beginning of the course, Arturo was dedicated to not just teaching the formulas and theorems, but encouraging a deep understanding of the concepts. Between sighs and murmurs, he remembered his own challenges in mathematics exams at university. He walked around the room, calming tempers and reassuring students that they had all the knowledge they needed to do well. When the classroom gong announced the start of the test, Arturo looked at his students with a sparkle in his eyes. Even though he knew that regardless of grade, what really mattered was the learning experience, he was eager to see how they would apply what they had learned under pressure. Throughout the race, he observed expressions of concentration and determination, and this filled him with pride. The room was filled with respectful silence, with only the sound of pens scratching paper, and he felt confident that he was fulfilling his mission to inspire and educate his community. Professor Carvalho's gaze was nothing short of a mixture of curiosity and disdain. He positioned himself behind Arturo, observing critically and meticulously. Carvalho believed that the advanced calculus test was his perfect opportunity to demonstrate the supposed inferiority of the priest's teaching method. As soon as the students turned in their exams, he prepared to examine each answer thoroughly, hoping to find flaws that he could expose. For him, mathematics was a relentless field, and certainty was a rule that had to be followed to the letter. However, as he reviewed the tests, he noticed that instead of errors, there was a new level of understanding emerging from the answers. The solutions presented reflected the practical approach that Arturo had imbued in them. With clear logic and well-articulated reasoning, Professor Carvalho frowned, a slight discomfort emerging. It was difficult to ignore that, even in defying Arturo, the priest was managing to do something he himself had not been able to do: create a safe and welcoming space for students to blossom. Carvalho's critical gaze began to turn into confusion as he was unable to dispute the validity of the responses flowing from the minds of the new generation because of the priest's beneficent influence. When the day came to reveal the results, Father Arturo was anxious. He organized the class with a mix of anticipation and nervousness, as he didn't know how his students would react to the grades. It was Arturo's old habit of welcoming students with a warm smile, in addition to wanting to create a space where they felt comfortable to discuss their mistakes and successes. But what really surprised him was the level of depth in the answers each of the students had offered. When reviewing the corrections, he found elaborate solutions, some even more advanced than expected for the class, which generated a sparkle in his eyes. He recognized that not only had they passed the test, but that they had understood mathematics at a higher level. When the feedback began, Arturo shared his observations and praised the creativity he saw in the responses. He highlighted that it was not just about numbers, but about the ability to think critically, suggesting that they could use this skill in other areas of life, such as financial and ethical decisions. The surprise increased when the students began to discuss their approaches, and Father Arturo realized that he had cultivated an environment where the exchange of ideas was very valuable. This made the day feel like a true triumph for the priest, as it wasn't just about grades, but about the deeper understanding he had fostered. With the surprising results of the test, Father Arturo decided it was time to change tactics and explore the possibilities of collaboration with Professor Carvalho. Instead of seeing Carvalho as a rival, he began to realize the strength that combining their approaches could offer. Arturo was aware that he needed to show Carvalho that the students' development could be enriched if they worked together. Inspired by the students' positive reaction, he organized a brainstorming session where they could discuss the differences in their teaching philosophies. He believed that mathematics was a language that could unite rather than divide. The priest raised the proposal and invited Carvalho to participate, hoping that the teacher, upon seeing the students' enthusiasm, might rethink his approach. With a little hesitation, Carvalho accepted the invitation. During the session, Arturo began describing how different perspectives could complement each other, enriching students' learning experiences. The atmosphere began to change when Carvalho realized that what seemed like a clash was turning into an opportunity for both to grow. The discussions created a fertile space where each person could understand the other's experience, and the tension that previously existed began to dissipate. This change in tactics could ultimately build a bridge to a more collaborative and inclusive future in mathematics education. After the debate session, a new air of respect began to hover between Father Arturo and Professor The initial event that had been a simple academic confrontation turned into a moment of mutual recognition. Carvalho, observing the passion and dedication of Arturo's students, began to rethink his own conceptions about teaching. He remembered how, when he was younger, his love of mathematics had motivated him, and the frustration of seeing it stifled in rigid academic structures. On impulse, Carvalho decided to open up. Father Arturo, I must admit that your students demonstrate a deeper understanding than I expected. They really captured the essence of mathematics, and that's inspiring. The statement, although simple, was an important recognition on Carvalho's part, motivating Arturo to encourage the exchange of ideas on how they could work together to foster the talent of their students, using their respective approaches. It was, without a doubt, a turning point that would pave the way for an even richer collaboration between the two educators. In the following days, Father Arturo and Professor Carvalho began a series of informal conversations that revolved around the intersection between theology and mathematics. Arturo, with his welcoming nature and willingness to listen, began to delve into the professor's perspective on how numbers and formulas could be seen through a more philosophical prism. During these conversations, Carvalho surprised Arturo by exploring how mathematical logic could in fact reflect the divine order of the universe. The priest, in turn, brought examples of how mathematical principles could be seen as a manifestation of God's creation, thus transforming the discussions into rich and inspiring dialogues. These exchanges helped both to understand that their areas of knowledge were not opposites, but could coexist, enriching their teachings and deepening the training of their students. Little by little, they began to integrate these discussions into their classes, creating a new approach that awakened intellect and spirituality, building on the mutual respect they had cultivated. As time passed, Father Arturo and Professor Carvalho began to build a friendship that was unusual but very necessary. It was interesting to watch how the previous rivalry turned into a feeling of camaraderie and respect. They began collaborating on educational projects, creating a series of workshops that combined Arturo's humanistic vision with Carvalho's technical precision. Mexticacan was the stage for this educational renaissance, where classes not only educated mathematically, but also opened space for conversations about ethics, morality, and values. Communities that were once divided were now coming together to support these new efforts, and their presence, being models of different approaches, attracted a lot of interest. During these moments, they discovered that dialogue, even when based on disagreements, could be a powerful bridge. The hours spent together became valuable moments of learning and mutual growth, solidifying not only their individual beliefs, but also the strength of teamwork. Inspired by their collaboration, Father Arturo and Professor Carvalho began looking for ways to not only teach better, but to become inspirational models among their students. Classes became a space for open dialogue, where challenging questions were addressed together. The students perceived this new alliance as an opportunity, not just to learn mathematics, but to discuss topics that connected his studies to everyday life and spirituality. During classes, they presented topics involving mathematics in everyday situations, discussing how mathematical ethics influenced their decisions. The soul of mathematics has now been intertwined with philosophy and spirituality, creating a vibrant environment. The interaction between students and the way ideas crossed paths in constructive debates made learning more meaningful. From this unusual friendship, new ideas and solutions to educational problems emerged, highlighting that collaboration and respect for different beliefs and practices enriched teaching, transforming not only learning, but the entire cultural dynamics in the community. Father Arturo has always believed that life experiences shape one's character and understanding. Once, during one of his lectures at school, he told young people about his childhood in Mexticacan, revealing how each challenge contributed to his formation. "I remember when my parents faced financial difficulties to support us. We helped with the harvest and realized the value of hard work, but there was also a time for dreams. I spent hours solving mathematical problems in an old notebook. It was the only way to escape and discover a world where numbers made sense, where I felt free," he said. These life stories were never just narratives, they served as brushstrokes to teach resilience. In each lecture, he emphasized that education is a path of transformation, and many students saw themselves reflected in these experiences, inspiring them to fight for their dreams, just as he did with the unconditional support of his family and community. This helped create him as a role model and leader, challenging everyone to see their own struggles as valuable parts of their educational journeys. The challenges of evangelization were not just a series of sermons. Father Arturo saw them as opportunities to dialogue with members of the community. Aware that new generations face a barrage of distractions and divergent opinions, he convinced his mentors that faith should not be an imposition, but an invitation to reflect. "Evangelizing is listening before speaking," he used to say. At one of his meetings, while talking to a group of young people, he asked, "What does faith mean to you?" The response was silence, but soon questions and stories of disappointment and hope emerged. He used these interactions as learning opportunities, integrating the spirit of mathematics into spiritual teachings. Soon, mathematics and faith were intertwined in his speech. He continued to emphasize that praying is like solving a complex equation, where one patiently searches for the right solution. Through this approach, many young people began to see religion in a more cheerful and inclusive way, and Arturo was able to transform evangelization into a living dialogue, a space where everyone could belong and believe without fear of being stoned by their doubts. Father Arturo's personal and spiritual growth was a journey of self-discovery and ongoing training. With the legacy of his mentors in mind, he realized that he not only educated his students, but also learned a lot from them. "Here, in the midst of our dialogue, is where my spirituality really reveals itself," he said, sharing moments when he listened to young people talk about their beliefs and challenges. In prayer sessions, Arturo introduced practices that led students to deep introspection. also highlighting that growth comes from the union between faith and knowledge. He proposed challenges that instigated reasoning, seeing mathematics as part of divine creation. It was in this way that he realized that he not only had a religious mission, but a deep meaning in each lesson. Daily reflections became rituals, not only for him, but also for the students, who began to question themselves and develop a critical sense. Looking back, Arturo felt such immense gratitude for each teaching that life had provided him in the continuous search for wisdom. Father Arturo found in mathematics an ability that transcended numbers and theorems. It was also, he believed, an expression of divine truth. In his classes, he began to explore how figures and patterns found in scripture could be represented mathematically. For example, he taught about geometry based on divine proportions, illustrating how creation followed a mathematical order, which could be seen in several passages throughout the Bible. The famous phrase, "The ways of the Lord are righteous," resonated in his mind as he made analogies with mathematical functions. Arturo remembered how parables could be seen as graphics that portrayed spiritual truths in a simple but deeply impactful way. This intersection of themes was an innovative way to help young people connect mathematics to their spiritual daily lives. He encouraged students to see the beauty in both areas of knowledge, making them not only learn mathematics but also value the life and moral lessons that the scriptures offered. Students admired this approach, and with each class the morals of mathematics became a fundamental part of their learning. Integrating mathematics and religion was a challenge that Father Arturo embraced with enthusiasm. He wanted his students to see that the two disciplines were not antagonistic, but rather part of a greater whole. During one of his classes, he began with the parable of the sower, highlighting the importance of sowing and harvesting in spiritual life. He then drew a parallel with mathematical functions. Just as a farmer must understand the soil and climate to harvest good fruit, you must understand mathematical foundations to solve problems effectively. Using graphs and equations, Arturo showed how patience and continuous work in mathematics could bear fruit over time, emphasizing that the same applies to spirituality. By the end of the class, many students seemed contemplative, realizing for the first time that their academic journeys could reflect their personal and spiritual journeys. This integration became a recurring theme in Arturo's classes and soon began to resonate deeply with his students. To implement the integration of mathematics and religion in a practical way, Father Arturo developed an innovative class. He invited his students to create projects that connected mathematical concepts with biblical themes. Each group should choose a parable or story from the Bible and represent it mathematically, whether through graphs, equations, or even games. One group chose the parable of talents and focused on concepts of statistics and probability to show the importance of investing resources well. Another group decided to explore the circle area formula, linking it to the idea that God's love is like a perfect circle, which has no end. The classroom transformed into a space of creativity and collaboration, where students not only applied mathematics, but also discussed issues of faith and morals. The results were surprising. Students were engaged and excited, and the fusion of mathematics with spiritual teachings brought new light to learning, making classes not only educational but also uplifting. When the projects were presented, the results went beyond Father Arturo's expectations. The depth of interpretations and creativity were remarkable. Not only did the students grasp mathematical concepts, they were also able to express their views on spirituality in ways that Arturo had never imagined. One of the most impactful projects was a presentation that compared the theology of the Trinity to complex numbers, challenging the class to understand deep questions of faith through a mathematical lens. Students shared moving reflections on how mathematics could represent the complexity of the divine. The classroom was full of enthusiasm, and even Professor Carvalho, who was watching from afar, was impressed by the students' ability to connect the two areas of knowledge. At the end of the presentations, Arturo realized that the richness of learning occurred not only in acquiring knowledge, but in understanding the intersection between their personal lives and what mathematics and faith could offer. The impact on students' lives was profound and lasting. After classes, many students began approaching mathematical subjects not as a burden, but as an opportunity for growth and self-discovery. The conversation during the break changed. Now, they not only commented on proofs and mathematical difficulties, but discussed how lessons of faith could be applied to solving the problems they faced. Some began to get involved in community activities, applying the understanding they gained in mathematics to help manage resources within the parish and even in fundraising projects for social missions. Students' self-esteem flourished. Teens who previously felt inferior now actively participated in discussions, asking insightful questions and challenging themselves and their peers to think critically. Father Arturo noted that, in addition to the improvement in grades, there was a growth in attitudes and values, reflecting that mathematics and faith were intertwining deeply in their lives, producing not only good students, but also young people inspired to be agents of change in their community. Revealing the true self, the learning space was quickly transformed into a home of acceptance and discovery. The students, upon realizing that Father Arturo's lessons transcended numbers, began to explore their own identity. One day, during a class, Arturo asked them to share a challenge they faced, whether academic or personal. One shy student, Javier, raised his hand, revealing his struggle with insecurity. The room was silent, but Arturo's encouragement made more students open up. They began to talk about how the expectations society placed on them made them doubt their own talents. Upon hearing these stories, Arturo made a connection between the challenges they faced and mathematics. Just like solving an equation, persistence and courage were needed to face life's difficulties. This moment of vulnerability helped build a stronger, more united community, where each student felt valued and understood. Revealing one's true self would be an important step in redefining their academic and personal trajectories, and the room was now filled with a collaborative spirit, where everyone helped each other discover who they truly were and could become, nurturing both mathematics and a deep understanding of faith and spirituality in their lives. The reconciliation with Professor Carvalho unfolded within a moment of unexpected synergy. After the students' presentations, Professor Carvalho, instead of walking away in resentment, took a bold step. He approached Arturo and, with an expression of genuine sincerity, said, "Father, I need to recognize that your students are not only successful in exams, but in life. Your unique approach has brought them to life, and for that, I would like to apologize for not having seen this before." Arturo, surprised, realized that Carvalho's humility was an important step towards a new chapter in their relationship. The priest replied, "We all have something to learn from each other, Professor. Our differences make us stronger. If you are willing, could we work together to create a program that combines the best of our approaches?" The idea of collaboration seemed to inspire Carvalho, who agreed to explore this new dynamic. Thus, both committed to holding a series of joint workshops, where they could merge their visions. While Arturo would introduce spirituality into mathematics and Carvalho would address more rigorous concepts, reconciliation not only strengthened their relationship, but also opened doors for students to see the value of unity in differences. This new alliance promised to create an innovative and inclusive environment, which further stimulated student curiosity and engagement. Reflections on respect and humility flourished within the classroom, as the new union between Arturo and Carvalho began to manifest itself in their educational practices. Both quickly realized that teaching was not about superiority, but an opportunity to serve. During one of their joint classes, Arturo and Carvalho instigated a debate about how respect should be a driving force in any field, be it mathematics, science, or even everyday life. Carvalho, using an analogy with the fundamental axioms of mathematics, highlighted that, just as certain principles are non-negotiable, respect and humility should be seen as inevitable essences in human interactions. Inspired by these discussions, Arturo offered an exercise. He asked students to write anonymous letters, each highlighting an experience where respect was key to a positive outcome or, conversely, where a lack of respect negatively impacted their lives. When reading some of the letters out loud, the impact of the words resonated with everyone, generating strong empathy. Each one began to question themselves about their attitudes and actions. The room environment became a sacred space, where mutual respect not only manifested itself as an essential value, but also as a reflection of Arturo and Carvalho's own mission to educate and form individuals, better prepared to face the world with compassion and respect. New chapter in education was inaugurated with a series of community events that united all segments of society around the proposal for a more inclusive and holistic education. Father Arturo and Professor Carvalho, now allies, decided to organize a science fair where not only mathematical and scientific projects would be displayed, but also spaces for discussion about the relationship between knowledge and faith. The event attracted both young students and family members and even older people from the community. Here, mathematics became a tool not only for problem solving, but also a form of self-expression and spirituality. Under the stewardship of Arturo and Carvalho, students showed how mathematics could be applied to solve real-life issues. From managing family finances to optimizing resources in local agriculture, ideas blossomed, and more than just displays. The projects became inspiring stories and starting points for conversations about integrity, ethics, and collaboration. The feria not only galvanized the community around a deeper educational standard, but also sowed respect and unity. Both teachers realized that knowledge could indeed connect hearts and minds, and thus the teachings they taught became not only academic, but also a source of pride and identity for all who embraced them. The partnership between Father Arturo and Professor Carvalho strengthened not only their mutual respect, but also the understanding that evangelization and education can coexist harmoniously. During a special class, Arturo decided it was the ideal time to introduce discussions about ethics and morals into mathematics learning. He began to talk about the teachings of Jesus and how they related to mathematical principles such as proportionality and equity. That morning, the room was charged with expectation. Arturo, in front of the board, drew a simple graph that showed the distribution of resources. Just as we consider justice in the distribution of what we have, we must apply the same logic to our learning and our lives. We want to be multipliers of hope and support, he said, with a smile. The students, intrigued, began to raise questions about how they could apply these concepts to their own lives. Arturo's ability to articulate issues of faith with mathematical education brought new air to learning and allowed students to see not just numbers, but the ethical implications of their actions. The dialogue intensified, and at the end of the class they understood that education was a vector of social transformation. Each of them left the room with the idea that learning mathematics was also a call to act in a fair and supportive way, in line with the teachings they absorbed from their faith. Gradually, new community projects began to emerge, driven by the collaboration between Arturo and Carvalho. Both decided that mathematics could be a powerful tool not only for teaching, but for producing visible change in the community. Thus, a movement was organized that took mathematical education beyond the classroom. During the community meetings, the priest and the teacher met with local leaders and the citizens of Mexico, seeking to identify how mathematical skills could be applied to solve everyday problems. One of the most audacious projects was the creation of an agricultural cooperative system where young people could learn to handle data to improve production and resource management. During the process, Arturo used graphs and tables to teach farmers about the importance of crop dating and analysis, averaging results and challenging them to optimize their efforts. Carvalho in turn led workshops on statistics and how to interpret results, reinforcing ideas about productivity and efficiency. The enthusiasm of the young people and the progressive transformation in agricultural practices were inspiring, showing that the union of education and practical application could offer the community a new insight into its capabilities. Respect solidified, and not just mathematics, but the community itself began to teach each other, triggering a collective learning process that reverberated across all ages. Developing new initiatives proved to be a priority for Father Arturo and Professor Cornejo. Aware that education was an ongoing journey, both were committed to creating a space where learning extended into the daily life of the community. Together, they floated the idea of evening classes, where adults and young people could come together to learn math and practical life skills. The initial classes focused on simple topics, such as family budgets and the importance of financial management, which attracted a large audience. Feeling that education should be relevant and accessible, Arturo used this space to integrate aspects of faith and morality into discussions about money and ethics. The way we use our resources reflects our deepest values, he said, seeking to make the connection between financial discipline and the Church's teachings of generosity. Carvalho, enthusiastic, brought practical examples of how mathematics is present in investments, loans, and even in small everyday decisions. This helped to demystify mathematics for many adults and was reinforced by the positive results that were seen in their everyday lives. As more people signed up, they promoted healthy debates and created bonds, feeling increasingly an active part not only of the classroom, but of the community itself. This initiative not only provided practical knowledge, but also a space where everyone felt welcomed and inspired to dream and grow together. Father Arturo's legacy began to take shape through the transformation he brought to Mexico. Looking back, Arturo realized that each step of his journey, from the first challenges to the strengthening of his friendship with Professor Carvalho, solidified a learning base that exceeded the barriers of traditional teaching. He became a beacon of hope in his community, where education was not limited to numbers but extended to human and spiritual values. The projects implemented not only raised the educational level, but also awakened a collaborative spirit among residents. Teachers began to seek innovative methods inspired by the examples set by Arturo and Carvalho, strengthening a new generation that respected the role of education as an instrument of transformation. And looking at his students who have now become leaders and role models in their communities, Arturo felt that his true legacy had been planted, the ability of each person to become an agent of change, using knowledge and compassion as tools. The classroom had become a space for not only intellectual, but emotional and spiritual growth. What was initially a dream became a vibrant reality, not just for him, but for everyone who crossed his path. Thus, the seed planted in his childhood continued to germinate, forming roots of hope and knowledge for future generations. The importance of empathy became evident in the journey of Padre Arturo and Professor Carvalho, especially in the way they managed to transform the students' learning environment. Arturo often recalled how empathy was the essence of his mission as a priest. It was the ability to understand and accept the pains and desires of their community. During classes, he worked to establish a space where students felt safe to share their stories and challenges. He realized that understanding them in their struggles not only made learning subjects easier, but also encouraged them to express vulnerabilities that were often hidden. Open conversations generated deep connections and showed everyone that each person carried unique baggage. At the same time, Carvalho learned the importance of being more welcoming and less rigid, allowing his students to bring their own stories to mathematics. Both approaches complemented each other, creating an atmosphere where empathy was intertwined with learning, showing that mathematics could be a language to unite human experiences, not just a cold and distant discipline. Now, they were not just educating but helping to shape the character of young people who would be more sensitive to each other's needs and realities, promoting empathy as a value to be cultivated in all aspects of life. The constant interaction between faith and knowledge became one of the pillars of the work of Father Arturo and Professor Carvalho. When Arturo introduced the concept that the pursuit of knowledge could be a form of worship, many students began to see their math classes in a new light. For him, mathematics was not just a language of numbers, but a way of understanding divine creation. He frequently referenced sacred texts, arguing that mathematical logic could mirror spiritual truths. Carvalho, little by little, began to explore this intersection, incorporating ethical discussions into his calculus classes. They encouraged students to seek truth, both through faith and scientific knowledge, allowing them to become critical and conscious thinkers. Thus, students learned that faith and knowledge were not antagonistic, but rather powerful allies that could enrich their lives. Spiritual interactions in classes became a catalyst for a deeper understanding of ethics and reason, allowing Mexico's youth to become not only proficient in mathematics, but also morally responsible citizens who sought the common good. The paths that crossed between Father Arturo and Professor Carvalho were not only the result of an educational collaboration, but represented a rich synergy that was formed at the intersection of their lives. Both realized that their life experiences and academic training prepared them to lead Mexico in an era of new educational possibilities. When they began working together, it was not just a union of distinct pedagogies, but a recognition that diversity of perspectives was true strength. Carrying their own baggage, they became a living example of how differences can be the basis for more meaningful learning. Arturo's experiences as a priest always ran in parallel with Carvalho's methodological rigidity, but the union of these forces brought an innovative freshness to the teaching of mathematics. Students came to understand that working as a team, respecting differences, also meant embracing the richness that these experiences brought to the classroom. Thus, the crossing paths became a symbol of the transformation that could occur when different voices are allowed to come together, especially in search of a common good. The light that shines in the darkness became a central theme in the discussions and teachings of Father Arturo and Professor Carvalho. Now the priest used this metaphor not just as a spiritual concept, but as a powerful analogy to describe the student's learning journey. In one of his classes, he shared a story about how stars are only visible in darkness, and the same applies to knowledge. It is often in difficulties and shadows that we find the greatest lessons. He encouraged students to see their obstacles as opportunities to learn and grow. This new perspective was now integrated into Carvalho's teaching philosophy, who began to encourage his students to embrace academic challenges as a way to enlighten their own lives. They realized that by joining forces and supporting each other through difficult times, they could shine even brighter. The classroom became a beacon of light, where doubts were recognized and discussed. Thus, the idea that light could emerge from difficulties became a guiding principle in the education and spiritual lives of young people, showing that each person could become a source of light in their own darkness. Preparations for the new challenges approaching in Mexticocan were intense and careful. Father Arturo and Professor Carvalho were aware that the journey of educational transformation was just beginning. They agreed that to continue to expand their positive impact on the community, they needed to carefully plan their next steps. The priest decides to bring together a team of students and volunteers to brainstorm ideas, creating a space where everyone could express their opinions and suggestions. During this meeting, a wave of enthusiasm permeated the air as participants discussed various approaches on how to apply mathematics in practical, everyday situations. Suggestions ranged from applied mathematics workshops to ideas on how to create an educational festival that combined mathematics and faith. Arturo firmly believed that inclusion of all sectors of the community was vital. Therefore, he made a point of listening carefully to each idea, encouraging free expression and creativity. Carvalho, in turn, brought his technical knowledge, suggesting ways to measure the effectiveness of each approach. This union of ideas not only prepared them for the challenges that lay ahead, but also solidified a sense of community, making everyone feel part of a common mission. The next step would be to bring together a group to plan and implement the ideas, but Arturo already felt that the seeds of a more promising future were being planted. Following the preparations, the mutual support between Father Arturo and Professor Carvalho became a key to the success of future projects. The priest knew that, for the impact to be lasting, it was essential that both were aligned and willing to help each other every step of the way. In building a solid project, Carvalho presented the idea of creating a mentoring program among students, allowing those who understood mathematical concepts more quickly to help their colleagues. This approach would not only reinforce learning, but also promote a spirit of solidarity, where everyone would feel the importance of supporting and being supported. Arturo supported the idea and began to involve more advanced students, encouraging them to be leaders in the classroom. Through mutual support, both educators began to see their students not just as recipients of knowledge, but as active participants in the learning process. A collaborative environment emerged among the students, who quickly realized that by sharing their skills, they were strengthening the biodiversity of ideas and opening paths for solving more complex problems. This new dynamic provided classes with a more inclusive style, where both students and teachers reciprocally benefited from diversity. Mutual support thus became an indestructible pillar in the educational journey that preceded the future they planned to build together. The continued personal growth of Father Arturo and Professor Carvalho has had a significant impact on the youth of Mexico. Both dedicated themselves to learning not only about their disciplines, but also about human development, leadership, and the importance of empathy. Each one began to explore new methodologies and participate in courses and workshops to broaden their pedagogical vision. Arturo felt that introspection helped him connect better with his students. He began adopting daily practices of meditation and prayer, which not only strengthened his spiritual mission, but also gave him clarity in everyday decisions. Carvalho, in turn, focused on understanding more about educational psychology, learning to deal with the diversity of personalities and needs that his students presented. This search for personal growth increasingly fueled the partnership, as both exchanged experiences and learning, enriching their pedagogical practice. What turned into a virtuous cycle, where each one encouraged the other to continue to grow. As they grew, their influence on the students became even more evident. They saw themselves as role models and as guides to sober, sustainable learning. This period of growth for both teachers appeared not only as an individual journey, but as a collective journey towards a brighter and more conscious future. Each step they took towards self-development echoed in the lives of their students, reflecting the importance of valuing holistic and continuous education. Building a bright future was the central focus of the initiatives that Father Arturo and Professor Cornejo were implementing in Mexico. The combination of their strengths and different approaches to education produced a transformative environment, which not only fed students' hunger for knowledge, but also awakened in them a sense of social responsibility. The mentoring program established among students was a great success, and several proposals emerged from this community development. One of the students proposed creating a volunteer project where young people could go to neighboring schools and offer educational support and mentoring. The idea was to also inspire those who were unable to access quality education. Conversations about mathematics, morality, and faith began to reverberate throughout the city, where Arturo and Cornejo's influence began to cross borders. In this endeavor, the genuine commitment of teachers to the development of their students stimulated the self-confidence and ambition of young people who began to see themselves as agents of change. They began to come together on initiatives that covered social issues in the community, from organizing campaigns and fundraisers to planning science fairs that reflected the intersection between education and spirituality. The future they were building became visible and full of opportunities. Mexico was not just a city, but an incubator of ideas and dreams that could prosper in a more just and supportive society, where education and faith became the foundations for a lasting legacy. Changes in religious education were a growing need in Mexico, where Father Arturo was looking for new ways to engage young people in the faith. He realized that the traditional teaching method was becoming less effective with new generations who were looking for answers and deeper connections with their spirituality. Thus, Arturo proposed a more interactive and dynamic approach in catechesis classes. Rather than just conveying information, he encouraged students to discuss contemporary issues of faith, integrating Christian principles into contexts that they could relate to their daily lives. Classes began to involve debates, videos, and group activities, becoming a safe space where young people felt comfortable expressing their doubts and sharing experiences. Furthermore, Arturo introduced elements of mathematics into the lessons, linking logic and faith. This new methodology not only attracted more students to classes, but also provided a sense of belonging to the community, where each person felt that their voices could make a difference, combining religious education with the practical experience of faith in everyday life. Integration of technology and education emerged as an essential response to accompany the transformations taking place in society. Father Arturo, always attentive to the needs of his students, decided to adopt new digital tools in his mathematics and catechesis classes. With the help of Professor Cornejo, they introduced online learning platforms that allowed students to review content anytime, anywhere. In-person classes began to be complemented by explanatory videos and discussions in digital forums. This methodology brought greater flexibility and accessibility to learning, allowing students to feel more connected with the content. Furthermore, technology also facilitated collaboration between students who could work in groups on projects through applications, even outside of class hours. The use of resources such as educational games and mathematical simulators stimulated young people's interest in the subject, showing that mathematics could be fun and interactive. This technological integration not only improved academic performance, but also prepared students for a future where technology and mathematics are essential. Mathematics in an accessible way became a priority in the educational strategies of Padre Arturo and Professor Cornejo, who realized that many students faced barriers when learning the subject. With a desire to demystify mathematics, Arturo created a series of lessons that focused on real-life situations and problems that students might encounter on a daily basis. He began using practical examples, such as calculating budgets for school events and estimates for purchasing materials, to show the immediate application of mathematics in family or community contexts. Furthermore, he created a tutoring system between students, where those who were more adept at mathematics could help their classmates who were having difficulty, encouraging cooperation and collective learning. This approach not only reduced anxiety about the subject, but also increased the self-esteem of students who realized that mathematics was an accessible and useful tool in their lives. The impact was felt in grades, but mainly in the way students began to relate to the subject, seeing it not as a burden, but as a valuable skill to be developed and enjoyed. The impact on future generations in Mexicoocan was significant and visible in the transformations that were taking place in the community. The changes promoted by Father Arturo and Professor Carvalho generated a safer, more welcoming and collaborative learning environment where young people not only learned mathematics, religion and science, but also cultivated values of empathy, respect, and solidarity. Former students began to return to volunteering classes, inspiring new generations to engage and deepen their knowledge. Community initiatives, such as the science fair and volunteer projects, planted seeds of social responsibility that germinated into mutual support initiatives among residents. Young people who went through this transformative experience began to take on leadership roles in their communities, using the skills and knowledge they gained to solve local problems. Furthermore, the integration of technology into classes has made new generations more prepared for a digital world, placing them in a prominent position for the future. The legacy built by Father Arturo and Professor Carvalho appeared to be not just temporary, but a true pillar of change, creating a culture of continuous learning and engagement that, over time, promised to transform Mexicoocan into a place of hope and development. With the consolidation of new teaching methods and the integration of principles of faith and mathematics, growth in faith and knowledge became evident in Mexicoocan. Father Arturo and Professor Carvalho noted that as young people were challenged to explore deep questions about their beliefs, education was no longer limited to formulas. Classes began to include debates on ethics, fraternity, and faith, emphasizing that the search for knowledge must be accompanied by a commitment to morality. The active participation of students in spaces for debate about the practical application of mathematics in their daily lives created an environment where spirituality and education coexisted. The positive feedback was palpable. Students felt more confident expressing their ideas, and the connection between their spiritual lives and education was strengthened. This growth in faith was reflected in a change in attitude, not only in classes, but also in the communities where they lived, creating a cycle of learning and personal development that reverberated far beyond the classroom. The focus on the search for knowledge that respected the human essence transformed students into agents of change, capable of reflecting and questioning the world around them, cultivating their faith while searching for answers. The expansion of the projects developed by Padre Arturo and Professor Carvalho took shape as a collective movement in Mexico. With success not only in classes, but also in volunteer initiatives, the idea of making education a social good began to spread throughout the region. One of the new projects was the creation of a virtual platform for young people from neighboring communities who previously did not have access to this type of education. The effort to connect diverse realities through education was an important milestone. The workshops offered served as a bridge to unite communities, using mathematics as a tool to address topics of inclusion and equality. Gradually, the vision that education could promote social change became a banner also embraced by community leaders. Students began to engage in more outdoor activities, organizing joint efforts to revitalize squares and public areas, always applying mathematical learning to measure results and impacts. These projects expanded the circle of influence of Padre Arturo and Carvalho, who now saw their actions not as a simple local mission, but as an inspiration for future generations. This expansion of projects has become a living example of how education can connect and transform lives, helping to build a legacy of hope and collaboration. Uniting communities has become a vital priority in the educational context of Mexicoocan. The desire and need for inclusion was palpable among young people and their families. After the initial successes, a new initiative began to take shape: the holding of an annual educational festival that would bring together the various parishes and schools in the region. The event was imagined as a space to celebrate learning, music, dance, and, of course, mathematics, promoting interaction between communities that were previously isolated. With the collaboration of local artists and teachers, the festival not only provides a space for the exhibition of knowledge, but also for the appreciation of the different cultures present in the region. With the magic of the holidays, families began to join in activities that brought together the youngest and oldest, allowing the exchange of experiences and wisdom to become a priority. During the event, students worked to solve mathematical challenges as a team, promoting collaboration and encouraging healthy relationships between different groups. The festival became a symbol of unity, not just to celebrate achievements, but to establish bonds that would last. This union of communities resurfaced a sense of belonging and collectivity that reverberated even in the simplest everyday interactions. The lessons learned along this journey of educational and spiritual transformation have shaped not only the students, but also the educators themselves. Father Arturo realized that true education goes beyond academic instruction. It is a joint journey of discovery and growth. Community feedback on projects and collaboration revealed the power of mutual respect and empathy. Both Arturo and Cornejo understood that their teaching approaches were valuable only to the extent that they remained open to listening and learning from the experiences of young people. Furthermore, the dialogue between faith and knowledge proved to be essential for cultivating a more holistic teaching approach. The in-depth discussions that emerged in classes showed that students were more willing to become active participants in their own education. With each new experience, both teachers reaffirmed the importance of acting with humility and curiosity. As projects expanded and became more inclusive, it became clear that knowledge and faith could and should go hand in hand. The lessons learned, therefore, were not just about math and religion, but about building a community that honored diversity and promoted the holistic development of each individual. More stories to share as the educational transformation in Mextecocan unfolded. Father Arturo and Professor Cornejo committed themselves to documenting the students' experiences and stories. Bringing together stories of overcoming and success, both realized that each story was a powerful narrative capable of inspiring others. They organized a meeting at the church, inviting the entire community to listen to the young people share their own experiences. Students like Javier, who once felt invisible, now told of their achievements and how education had empowered them. Upon hearing words like, "Mathematics became a bridge to my dreams," Arturo's heart filled with joy. These stories reflected not only academic learning but also personal and spiritual growth. The event became a milestone, establishing a space where the community could feel united and supported, and new dreams began to be dreamed. Arturo and Cornejo realized that sharing these stories was one of the most meaningful legacies they could leave. Together, they dedicated themselves to creating a book entitled Hearts and Numbers, where the young people's stories would be gathered and disseminated outside the region, to inspire even more people to believe in the power of education and faith in their lives. Final reflections. As time went by, the transformations in the city of Mextecocan became increasingly evident, and the lessons learned by Padre Arturo and Professor Cornejo echoed in the community. On a sunny day, the two educators sat together on a bench in the central square, where many young people used to gather. Reflecting on the journey they had taken, Arturo said, "Sometimes I wonder how we would be able to impact our community without the humility and unity we have developed among ourselves." Cornejo agreed, noting that their friendship had helped them see education from a new perspective. Together they realized that love and mutual respect were the key to inspiring the next generation of leaders. With education not just as a means of imparting knowledge, but as a bond that could unite and transform, they found a deeper purpose in their lives. They both recognized that their learning journey would never end. Deep in their hearts, they knew that if they continued to nurture empathy, collaboration, and dialogue, they could face any challenge that came their way. So the legacy they built wasn't just about math or religion, but about the ability to touch lives and make a difference through human connection. The power of friendship between Father Arturo and Professor Cornejo had become a powerful example of how friendship and collaboration could lead to great change. In the months that followed, they continued to work together, expanding their initiatives and involving more students and families. The environment they created favored the formation of deep bonds, not only between them, but also between the students, who learned to value friendship and collaboration in their own journeys. Arturo observed how interactions became more respectful and supportive as students felt encouraged to express their ideas and opinions. On a special day, they organized a Friendship Day event, where young people shared moments in their lives that were impacted by bonds of friendship. Sharing became a collective learning laboratory, demonstrating that by coming together, even the biggest challenges could be overcome. At the end of the day, feeling the joy in the air, Arturo and Cornejo realized that the true power of friendship lay in its ability to transform lives and create a chain of love and solidarity that extended throughout the community. The act of sharing friendship became a lesson that would reverberate for generations, showing that, together, they could reach new horizons and fulfill dreams that previously seemed distant. Farewell and New Beginnings presented itself as a moment of transformation for Father Arturo and Professor Carvalho, who felt that they had fulfilled their mission in the city of Mextecocan. After years of dedication and teaching, the day came when Arturo decided to expand his mission to other communities, taking with him everything he had learned. On a farewell night, the city came together to celebrate their achievements and the connection they had created. Friends, students, and families were in attendance, ready to honor the impact Arturo had on their lives. With tears in his eyes, he expressed his gratitude, saying, "This is not a final farewell, but a new beginning. I carry each one of you in my heart, and the hope is that you continue to sow love and education wherever you go." An emotional Carvalho shared his commitment to continue the work they had started together, bringing education to life and transforming mathematics and spirituality. The farewell, instead of bringing sadness, revealed a new energy to the community that came together around this new beginning. With the promise that friendship and collaboration would prevail, they began to see that, even with the distance, the legacy they had built together would continue to flourish in Mextecocan, fueling the dreams and hopes of many future generations. True education goes beyond the transfer of knowledge. It is a journey of mutual growth, friendship, and collaboration, where respect and empathy become the keys to transforming lives and communities. We'd love to hear from you. What inspiring story would you like to hear next? Share your ideas and suggestions in the comments. How do you believe friendship and collaboration can positively impact education and community life? If you liked this story and want to follow more inspiring content, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and keep an eye out for our next video.